I was supposed to be gone until 5. A client canceled our appointment last minute, so I picked up my dry cleaning and headed home without calling first. I figured I'd have a quiet hour to myself before the sun dipped behind the hill. I didn't expect to find my dresser in the hallway. The drawers were pulled halfway out. One of them had my underthings spilling over the side like someone had been rifling through it and got bored halfway. I stepped over a pile of folded towels, and followed the sound of voices coming from upstairs. The smell of fresh paint hit me like bleach. Sharp. Intrusive. Not mine. I reached the top of the stairs and turned toward the master bedroom. 2 men I didn't recognize were rolling bubblegum pink paint onto my walls. I had painted gray 2 years ago, with trembling hands, standing on a ladder alone for the first time since Harold died. My bed had been pushed to the far wall and covered in plastic. The windows were wide open, and there, standing in the center of it all, was Ivy. She had a clipboard in one hand and a measuring tape dangling from the other. Her smile was bright and empty. "Oh, you're home early," she said. "We're renovating it before making it ours." She said it like she was letting me in on a surprise birthday gift. Like it was sweet. Like this was normal. Reed stood behind her, silent. His arms crossed his shoulders, slumped. He looked like a child who'd just been caught in a lie, but didn't have the energy to explain. I looked at him. He looked at the floor. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked back down the stairs, stepped into the kitchen, and picked up the cordless phone from its cradle. My fingers didn't tremble. My voice didn't shake. I called the locksmith first, then Margot. Then I sat in the living room and waited. The painters didn't even realize I had left. My name is Audra. I'm 64 years old, and I've been a widow for 7. I bought this house 6 months after Harold passed. It wasn't much a single-story warped porch steps peeling paint, but it had good bones and sunlight in the kitchen. I didn't want something perfect. I wanted something I could fix with my own hands. Something that would keep me busy enough to outpace the grief, even if just for a while. This house gave me that. It gave me purpose. I patched drywall, ripped up carpet, learned to seal tile and install hardware. I drank my morning coffee by the window Harold would have loved, listening to the birds build nests in the pine just outside the glass. It wasn't just a house. It was my restart. It was the first thing that was mine, without compromise, without memory of hospitals and slow goodbyes. Reed had already moved out by then. He was 22, in love with a girl I'd barely met, eager to become someone other than Audra's son. I understood. That was what growing up looked like. But something about the way he disappeared so completely, so willingly, left an ache that settled between my ribs and never quite left. He married Ivy 6 months after moving out. I wasn't invited to the courthouse. I heard about it through a cousin who saw the photos online. Since then, our relationship had been polite, surface level. They'd come for Sunday lunch sometimes. Ivy always arrived with a different excuse for why she couldn't stay long or why she needed to borrow this or that. And I'd let it slide. Because fighting felt worse than swallowing the discomfort. Because I thought maybe if I kept making space eventually, they'd see it. See me. See that I had built a life, not a waiting room. But over time, their visits stretched longer. Ivy left her heels by the door. Reed set up a charger in the guest room. They started saying things like, "We'll be back later," instead of "Thanks for having us." They blurred the line between welcome and assumption so slowly that I didn't notice the shift until they painted my bedroom pink. Sunday dinner had always been mine. My table, my recipes, my rules. Even after Harold passed, I kept the tradition. It was one of the few threads still connecting me to Reed. I'd roast a chicken steam, the rice always overdo it a little, and hope the quiet between us would someday soften. That night, Reed brought Ivy like usual. She walked in without knocking, set her phone on the table, and made herself a plate before anyone said grace. Margot couldn't make it, so I'd invited my sister Nadine to join. She had a way of filling the silence with questions no one really wanted to answer. We ate in uneven conversation, Reed mumbling about work, Nadine offering unsolicited parenting tips for children she never raised. Ivy scrolled between bites. She didn't say much, just sighed occasionally loud enough to be noticed. Then Nadine cleared her throat, a sound I've known since childhood, to mean nothing good was coming next. Reed and Ivy are in a tight spot, she said. Their lease is ending. The market's rough. Maybe they could stay here for a bit. I didn't put my fork down. I didn't raise my voice. I just said no. Simple, direct, final. Reed blinked like he hadn't considered that I might actually have an opinion. Ivy snorted. You've got a whole guest room. Or two, she said, eyes still on her screen. I looked at Reed, hoping for something, an apology, a little shame, anything that resembled the boy I raised. He just chewed his food and avoided my gaze. I realized right there between the gravy and the green beans that I'd become something else to them. A spare room, a soft landing, a resource. Not a person. They'd decided where they would go before even asking. Nadine was just the messenger. I was the obstacle. I cleared the plates in silence while they lingered over dessert like nothing had been said at all. Ivy complimented the pie. Reed took the last slice to go. By the time I closed the door behind them, my hands were shaking again. Not from anger, from recognition. It was already happening. I wasn't supposed to be home until late. The clinic had a full afternoon of back-to-back consults, but a last-minute cancellation freed up my schedule. I stopped for gas, picked up a loaf of bread, and pulled into my driveway just after 4. The curtains in the living room were open. I could see shadows moving inside. I stepped through the front door and froze. The coffee table was buried in moving boxes, some taped, some half open. One had my name on it, written in black Sharpie, like I was being cataloged. My blanket from the couch was crumpled on the floor, and the remote was gone. Then came the smell. Paint. Sweet and sharp, too fresh to be anything other than new. Upstairs, voices echoed, 2 women talking, laughing footsteps crossing hardwood. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step tighter in my chest than the last. The bedroom door was wide open. My bedroom. Ivy stood in yoga pants and a cropped hoodie, arms streaked in pink. The walls were halfway done. My soft gray Harold's favorite was already buried under a thick bubblegum coat. One of the painters looked up startled. The other kept rolling, whistling to himself. Ivy turned and lit up like she'd planned a surprise party. Don't worry, we'll bring our own linens, she said. Like that settled it. Reed sat in the corner scrolling his phone. He didn't even look up. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't ask what they were doing or who gave them permission. I turned around, walked out, and drove straight to the hardware store. Bought new locks. Paid extra for rush installation. That night, a man named Darren replaced every single entry point on my house front back garage. I didn't sleep. I watched the hallway. I waited. At 8:17 the next morning, my phone lit up with Ivy's name. Hey. Weird thing. My key's not working anymore. I put my coffee down, stared out the window, and let the call go to voicemail. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like something had finally clicked into place. Margot came over before noon with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a knowing look on her face. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. The painter's van had been parked outside my house the day before, and nothing slips past Margot. You waited too long, she said, setting the coffee down on my kitchen counter. I would have changed the locks last year. She wasn't wrong. I'd let too many small things slide. Ivy, leaving dishes in the sink. Reed plugging in his work laptop at my dining table. The way they walked through my door without knocking like it had never been mine. Now it was mine again. The locks were new. The silence was cleaner. I pulled out my phone and typed one sentence. The house is no longer available for guests. I sent it to Ivy. That was all I wrote. No greeting, no explanation. She left 7 voicemails in the next 2 hours. The first one was confused. The second was annoyed. By the third, she was crying. In the fourth, she said Reed had nowhere else to go. 5 and 6 were angry. The 7th was just quiet breathing before she hung up. I didn't listen to any of them in full. Then Reed called. I watched his name flash on the screen for a full 30 seconds before I silenced it. He texted after. We didn't mean to upset you. It's not like we're strangers. But that's exactly what they felt like. Strangers who wore the faces of people I used to know. Ivy had never called me Mom. Reed hadn't hugged me in over a year. When Harold died, it was Margot who checked in, not them. When I signed the loan on this house, they didn't offer to lift a box. But the moment it was finished, they circled it like vultures. I put the phone face down on the table and went back to sanding the guest room door frame. Something had been sticking for weeks, and I finally had the piece to fix it. Later that evening, I pulled a manila envelope from the file cabinet in my bedroom and placed it on the counter. Tomorrow, I'd drop it off with the attorney. I sat across from my lawyer the next morning, flipping slowly through each draft page as she read the clauses aloud. Her tone was even professional, but I could tell she understood. Older women rarely need to explain themselves twice. The document was short and clear. No person may reside in my home without my written and notarized consent. All previous keys issued are revoked and considered invalid. Any entry without consent constitutes trespassing and will result in legal action. I initialed every line. Then I signed the last page and slid it across the table. She nodded, stapled it neatly, and offered to have a copy mailed. I asked for 2. 1 for the records, 1 for the apartment Reed and Ivy shared above a liquor store and next to a laundromat they never used. The envelope went out that afternoon. 2 days later, I opened my front door to find Reed standing on my porch with a white paper bag in one hand and a coffee he didn't know I no longer drank in the other. Brought scones, he said, like it was an apology. Your favorite. From Merritt's. I didn't take them. I waited. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, eyes darting toward the lock, like he still couldn't believe it had changed. You're really doing this? He asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sigh or soften. I walked to the credenza, picked up the extra copy of the legal notice, and handed it to him. You should have read the room, I said. Now read this. He took it reluctantly, didn't open it. Just stared at the top corner like it might change into something less final. Ivy's upset, he said, almost under his breath. She feels unwanted. She is, I said. By me. In my home. He blinked like I'd slapped him, then nodded slowly. Right. He didn't say goodbye. Just walked off the porch and down the path. The scone bag dangled in his hand until he reached his car. Then he dropped it in the trash bin by the curb. That night I slept without checking the locks twice, but the peace didn't last long. 2 weeks of silence. No calls, no texts, no dropped-off bakery bags or forced apologies. I thought maybe the papers had done their job. Maybe the message had finally landed. Then Tuesday came. I was organizing supply orders at the clinic when my phone buzzed on the counter. Motion detected front door, then again, side entry. Then again, backyard gate. 3 alerts, rapid succession. I tapped open the app. The front camera lit up first. Reed. He was wearing the same jacket he used to mow my lawn in. A baseball cap pulled low over his face. Behind him stood Ivy, arms folded tight, glancing over her shoulder, like she already knew it was wrong. My heart was already racing when the second camera switched on side view. He tried the door, jiggled the handle, then pulled something from under his coat. A crowbar. Ivy said something. Her mouth moved fast, but her feet didn't. She didn't stop him. She didn't turn away. The third camera caught the moment he wedged the bar between the door and the frame. I could hear the groan of the wood through the app's mic. He wasn't checking if I was home. He was forcing his way in. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I hit save clip and archived the entire 5-minute sequence. My hands didn't shake. I dialed the sheriff's office, gave my name, and told them what I had. The woman on the other end of the line said, "Stay put. We're dispatching someone now." I hung up, locked the clinic door, and waited behind the counter, watching the feed like a movie I already knew the ending to. By the time the squad car arrived, they were gone. But the footage stayed. Every angle. Every face. The officer took my statement, reviewed the clips, and nodded slowly. "We'll file this as attempted unlawful entry," he said. "You've got more than enough evidence." I burned a copy onto a flash drive and handed it over. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, still in my work clothes, staring at the deadbolt. For the first time in my life, I didn't know if I could trust the man I raised not to come back with worse. They booked Reed that same night. The deputy called to confirm. He's being processed. No priors. He'll be out by morning, but it's on record now. His tone was measured, but not unkind. Like he'd seen enough families tear each other apart to know this wasn't new. After that, my phone rang for hours. Nadine, Ivy's mother, Ivy herself, then Reed. Each call chipped away at the quiet I'd fought to reclaim. I let them go to voicemail. Let the phone buzz and buzz until the screen went dark again. But when Ivy called for the 5th time, I answered. She didn't scream. Didn't plead right away. Her voice was low, breathless. "We're not asking to come back," she said. "We got the message. Just, please drop the charges." Reed's panicking. He didn't think she paused. I didn't say a word. "We won't come near you again," she said. "Ever. I swear. Please." I hung up without replying. That night I didn't sleep much. I stood by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee, watching the wind move through the pine trees. The locks were changed. The footage was saved. The contract was signed. I wasn't afraid. I was just tired. By sunrise, I'd made my decision. The sheriff's office was quiet when I walked in. I told the desk officer I wanted to withdraw the complaint. She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. I signed the form, handed over the case number, declined a receipt. Reed was released before noon. No one called to thank me. No one needed to. They knew. I hadn't forgiven anything. I hadn't softened. I'd just drawn the line, then erased the part where they could say I'd gone too far. They moved in with Ivy's mother a week later. At least that's what Margot heard from the mail carrier. I never confirmed it. I didn't need to. They didn't come back. They didn't write. They didn't test the locks again. And for the first time in years, I felt like no one was waiting for me to bend. 6 months passed without a word. No knocks at the door. No messages slipped into my mailbox. No calls that I let go unanswered. The silence wasn't loud anymore. It had become steady. Like a hum I could finally live with. Margot stopped me one afternoon while I was trimming the hedges. She leaned close as if she were about to confess a crime. "Saw Ivy at the grocery store," she whispered. "Pregnant." I just nodded. "Word is they're living with her parents now," she added. Reed looked worn down. I smiled faintly, more out of politeness than anything. For months I'd braced myself for some new intrusion, a fresh angle to get back inside my walls. Instead, they'd simply gone elsewhere. I didn't feel relief. Relief implies fear had lingered. I didn't feel guilt either. Guilt needs regret to survive, and I had none. What I felt was peace. I folded laundry in the afternoon sun, the cotton warm against my hands. I repainted the laundry room a pale shade of blue, steady strokes erasing scuffs that had been there since I moved in. The room looked brighter, lighter, as though it had been waiting for me to finally notice it. Later, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and grounding. I sat at the small table, let the steam rise against my face, and listened to the stillness around me. No doors slamming upstairs. No footsteps that didn't belong to me. No voices arguing over what color my walls should be. That night, I went to bed without double-checking the locks. I didn't wake at midnight to peek at the security feed. I didn't imagine headlights sweeping across the driveway. I slept straight through till morning, the kind of sleep that feels like starting over. And when the sun came through the curtains, I realized something had shifted. The house wasn't just safe now. It was mine again, in every corner, in every silence, in every breath. I walk barefoot through the rooms in the quiet mornings. The floors don't creak under me anymore, though I used to hear every board as if the house was bracing against intrusion. Now, they hold steady. The walls are exactly as I left them, gray in the bedroom's soft cream in the hallway, the faintest blue in the kitchen. No new colors, no careless hands undoing my work. I never repainted. I never rearranged. There was no need. The house carried my choices the way it carried me, without question, without challenge. It remembers me, not them. On the windowsill in the living room, the same ivy plant still climbs its trellis. I water it each morning, careful not to let the soil dry out. It grows slowly but steadily, its tendrils reaching in quiet persistence. Sometimes I catch myself talking to it while I pour the water. I think Harold would have laughed at that. Sundays belong to coffee with Margot on the porch. We sit in the shade and watch neighbors walk their dogs or wave from their cars. The steam rises from our mugs, and the air carries the smell of roasted beans instead of wet paint. We don't talk about Reed or Ivy anymore. We talk about the weather, about the headlines, about whether we should plant new flowers by the walkway come spring. Every so often, a car pulls up too slowly near the curb. Months ago, that sound would have made me stiffen, waiting for the slam of doors, for the knock I didn't want. Now I don't even pause. I don't flinch. I know what they don't. No one has keys. No one has a claim. No one is moving in. This house stayed mine. Not because of signatures or contracts, not even because of locks or cameras. It stayed mine because I refused to give it away in the smallest ways, inch by inch, visit by visit, assumption by assumption. And as I move from room to room, the house feels lighter. It doesn't carry their noise anymore. It only carries me.